I stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the stir-fry, when Thomas's voice drifted in from the living room. Rachel can figure it out herself. I didn't need my parents' help for college. Neither does she. My hands stilled on the cutting board as his dismissive tone washed over me. Swallowing hard, I called out, "Are you listening, Tom? Rachel needs our support." He didn't even glance up from his laptop. "She's a smart kid. She'll be fine." The knife clattered against the counter as I set it down, frustration bubbling inside me. How could he be so nonchalant about our granddaughter's future? Didn't he understand how much this meant to her? To us? I wiped my hands on a towel and marched into the living room. "Tom, look at me." When he finally met my gaze, I pressed on. "Rachel has worked so hard. She deserves our help with college applications and figuring out the finances." He shrugged, his eyes already drifting back to the laptop screen. "We didn't have that kind of support, and we turned out all right." My jaw clenched as I fought the urge to snap at him. Didn't he see how times had changed? The opportunities we wanted to give Rachel? Before I could respond, his laptop chimed with a new email notification. He clicked it open, and I caught a glimpse of the sender's name, Helen Morris. A knot formed in my stomach as I recognized the name of his old flame from decades ago. Thomas quickly minimized the window, but not before I saw the suggestive subject line, "Rekindling an old spark." The room started spinning as the weight of his betrayal hit me. All these years I had trusted him, loved him unconditionally, and this was how he repaid me? Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them away, straightening my shoulders. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "You know what, Tom?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Rachel and I will figure it out on our own. Clearly, we can't count on your support." His brow furrowed, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. I turned on my heel and marched back into the kitchen, my mind racing. How could I have been so blind? The signs were there, his emotional distance, his preoccupation with work, and that damned laptop. But I had chosen to believe in the man I loved, the man I had built a life with. The tears threatened again, but I angrily swiped them away. I couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity, not when Rachel's future was at stake. As I resumed chopping the vegetables with renewed vigor, a sense of determination washed over me. If Thomas wasn't going to step up, then I would have to be strong for both of us. Rachel deserved every opportunity in the world, and I would move heaven and earth to make that happen. This was just the beginning. The first step in breaking free from the life I had known and forging a new path, one where Rachel's dreams took priority and my own self-worth wasn't defined by a man's indifference. It was time to take control of our lives once and for all. I should have known better than to expect a warm welcome from Margaret. The moment Thomas and I stepped into her immaculate living room, her piercing gaze zeroed in on me like a hawk spotting its prey. "Evelyn, dear," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine disdain, "how lovely of you to join us in our time of grief." I forced a tight smile, reminding myself to stay composed. "Of course, Margaret. We're family." Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and I braced myself for the inevitable jab. "Yes, well, some of us understand the meaning of family better than others." Thomas shifted uncomfortably beside me, but said nothing. As usual, he chose to remain silent in the face of his mother's thinly veiled insults. The memories came flooding back. The first time I met Margaret, her disdainful once-over that made me feel like a speck of dirt on her pristine carpet. And the years that followed, her constant undermining of my role as Thomas's wife. Her not-so-subtle digs about my inability to provide her with grandchildren of her own. Rachel was the only thing that had brought us any semblance of peace, a common ground where Margaret's criticisms seemed to soften, if only slightly. But even that fragile truce had shattered in recent months as Margaret's true colors resurfaced with a vengeance. "Grandma, I'm so sorry about Grandpa," Rachel said, stepping forward to embrace Margaret. For a moment, Margaret's expression softened, and I allowed myself a glimmer of hope that perhaps this tragedy would bring us closer together. But then her gaze flickered to me, and the hardness returned. "Thank you, dear," she said, patting Rachel's cheek. "At least someone in this family understands the importance of respect and loyalty." The words hung in the air like a slap, and I felt the familiar sting of tears prickling my eyes. Respect and loyalty, two virtues Margaret had never extended to me, no matter how hard I tried. As the funeral proceedings began, I found myself retreating into my own thoughts, replaying the countless times Margaret had made me feel small, insignificant. each snide remark, each disapproving glance, chipping away at my sense of self-worth. But this time, something felt different. A spark of defiance ignited within me, fueled by the realization that I had spent too many years allowing Margaret's toxicity to seep into my life, poisoning my relationships and undermining my confidence. I glanced at Rachel, her head bowed in solemn respect, and felt a surge of protective fierceness. This cycle of emotional abuse would end with me. I would not allow Margaret's venom to infect the next generation, to strip away Rachel's self-assurance and ambition the way it had mine. As the service drew to a close, I made a silent vow to myself. No more cowering, no more swallowing my pride for the sake of keeping the peace. From this moment on, I would stand tall, shielding Rachel from the onslaught of negativity that had plagued my own life for far too long. Margaret might have won countless battles in the past, but the war was far from over. And this time, I had no intention of surrendering without a fight. "We should move in with Mom for a while," Thomas said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She needs our support after Dad's passing." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips as Margaret's disapproving gaze flickered in my mind's eye. If I objected, she would no doubt paint me as the selfish, uncaring daughter-in-law, more concerned with my own comfort than family loyalty. So instead, I swallowed my reservations and nodded. "Of course, dear. Whatever your mother needs." Thomas gave a curt nod, already turning his attention back to his laptop, the matter settled as far as he was concerned. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Of course, he wouldn't consider my feelings on the matter. Not when his mother's wishes were involved. As we began packing up our belongings, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that had settled in the pit of my stomach. Living under Margaret's roof, subject to her constant scrutiny and criticism, felt like a prison sentence. But I clung to the hope that perhaps, in her time of grief, she might soften if only a little. Maybe this could be an opportunity to build a bridge, to finally earn her respect and acceptance as part of the family. Foolish, I know. But a girl can dream. The first few days after our arrival were almost bearable. Margaret maintained a facade of graciousness, thanking us profusely for our support and understanding during this difficult time. I should have known it wouldn't last. It started with little comments here and there, thinly veiled jabs about the way I organized the kitchen or folded the laundry. Petty criticisms that would have been easy to brush off had they not been laced with that all-too-familiar condescension. "Honestly, Evelyn, is it so difficult to keep a tidy home?" she would sk, eyeing the barely perceptible clutter with disdain. "A woman's domain is her castle, you know." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was grieving, that I needed to be patient and understanding. But with each passing day, her barbs grew sharper, her mask of civility slipping further. And then, inevitably, she turned her sights on Rachel. "That girl spends entirely too much time with her nose buried in those books," she sniffed one evening as Rachel retreated to her room after dinner. Hardly becoming behavior for a young lady. Thomas, ever the obedient son, merely grunted in agreement, his eyes glued to the television screen. But I couldn't let it slide, not when it came to Rachel's future. "She's studying for her college applications," I said, keeping my tone even. "Education is important to her." Margaret's lips curled into a disdainful sneer. "Education? Is that what they're calling it these days? In my time, young women focused on more practical matters, finding a suitable husband, running a proper household." The words hung in the air, a slap to my face, and everything I believed in. I opened my mouth, a biting retort on the tip of my tongue, but Thomas cut me off with a sharp look. "Mother knows best, Evelyn," he said, his voice low with warning. And just like that, I deflated, the fight draining out of me. Because in this house, under Margaret's iron rule, her word was law. And no amount of arguing or reasoning would change that. As I retreated to the guest room that night, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a terrible mistake in agreeing to this living arrangement. Margaret's toxicity seemed to seep into every corner, poisoning the very air we breathed. But even as doubt gnawed at me, a small flicker of hope refused to be extinguished. This was my family, for better or worse. And if I had to weather Margaret's storms to keep us together, then so be it. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. The tension in the house was palpable, like a tightly coiled spring ready to snap at any moment. Margaret's disdain for Rachel's academic ambitions had escalated from snide comments to outright hostility, and Thomas, ever the dutiful son, fell in line behind his mother's vitriol. All this fuss over college applications, Margaret sneered one evening as Rachel pored over her study materials. As if a fancy degree is going to make her anything more than an overeducated spinster. Rachel's shoulders tensed, but she kept her eyes trained on her books, refusing to engage. My heart ached for her, this strong, resilient girl who had endured more emotional turmoil in her young life than anyone should have to bear. Mother's right, Thomas chimed in, his voice laced with condescension. You're wasting your time on all this book learning when you should be focusing on more practical matters. That was the final straw. I slammed my hand on the kitchen counter, the sharp sound cutting through the tension like a knife. Enough. Rachel has worked tirelessly for this opportunity, and we should be supporting her dreams, not tearing them down. Margaret's eyes narrowed to slits as she turned her icy glare on me. Don't you dare speak to me that way in my own home, Evelyn. You're a guest here, and you'll show me the respect I deserve. Respect? I scoffed, emboldened by the righteous fury coursing through my veins. You've done nothing but belittle and undermine us since the moment we arrived. Well, I won't stand for it anymore, not when it comes to Rachel's future. Thomas stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. That's enough out of you. Mother knows what's best, and if you can't see that, then maybe you should. Maybe I should what, Thomas? I challenged, squaring my shoulders and meeting his gaze head-on. Leave? Is that what you were going to suggest? An uncomfortable silence settled over the room, thick and suffocating. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Thomas's eyes, a brief crack in his unwavering loyalty to his mother's twisted ideals. But then Margaret spoke, her voice dripping with venom. Well, if the ungrateful girl wants to throw away her life on useless pursuits, far be it from me to stop her. But don't expect any support from this family. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I turned to Rachel, whose eyes shone with unshed tears, her shoulders slumped in defeat. In that moment, something shifted within me. A protective fire ignited, burning away the last vestiges of doubt and fear that had kept me tethered to this toxic environment. I would not allow Margaret's poison to seep into Rachel's spirit, to extinguish the bright flame of her ambition and self-worth. Squaring my jaw, I met Margaret's steely gaze with a defiant one of my own. You're right, Margaret. We don't need your support. Rachel and I will forge our own path, one free from your constant belittling and manipulation. Thomas's eyes widened in disbelief. But before he could respond, Rachel spoke up, her voice trembling but resolute. Grandma's right, Mom. We don't need them. She rose to her feet, gathering her books and notes with shaking hands. I'm done letting them make me feel small. I know what I'm capable of, and I won't let anyone stand in my way. Pride swelled in my chest as I watched the strength and determination radiate from her. In that moment, I knew we would be all right, better than all right. We would thrive, unburdened by the toxic weight of Margaret's control and Thomas's complacency. As Rachel retreated to her room, I turned back to my husband and his mother, my mind made up. We're leaving, I announced, my voice steady and unwavering, and we're never looking back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and hostility. Margaret, enraged by my defiance, doubled down on her efforts to undermine Rachel and me at every turn. Ungrateful, the both of you, she spat one evening as we sat down for dinner, after everything this family has done for you. Thomas remained silent, his jaw clenched tight as he stared down at his plate. I knew better than to expect him to come to our defense. He was too deeply entrenched in his mother's web of manipulation. Rachel, bless her resilient spirit, met Margaret's venom with a steely gaze. We're grateful for the opportunities we've been given, Grandma, but we won't let you dictate our lives or diminish our dreams. Margaret's eyes narrowed dangerously. How dare you speak to me that way, you insolent child? Your mother has clearly failed to instill any sense of respect or propriety in you. That's enough, I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. You will not speak to Rachel that way, not in my presence. Thomas's head whipped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Evelyn, you can't talk to Mother like that. And why not? I challenged, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. She's shown us nothing but contempt and disrespect since the moment we arrived. Well, I'm done tiptoeing around her fragile ego. Margaret's face contorted with rage, her lips curling into a sneer. How dare you? No, Margaret, how dare you? I cut her off, rising from my seat to glare down at her. How dare you try to crush Rachel's dreams and ambitions simply because they don't align with your antiquated beliefs? She's a brilliant, hard-working young woman, and she deserves our full support, not your constant belittling. Thomas opened his mouth, no doubt to defend his precious mother, but I held up a hand to silence him. And you, Thomas, you're no better. You've stood by and let her poison fester, allowing her toxicity to seep into our lives and our relationships. Well, no more. I turned to Rachel, my heart swelling with pride at the strength and determination shining in her eyes. Pack your things, sweetheart. We're leaving this toxic environment behind once and for all. Like hell you are, Margaret snarled, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. This is my house, and you'll do as I say, or... The shrill ring of Thomas's phone cut her off, and he quickly answered, stepping away from the table. I watched as his expression shifted, a mixture of guilt and something else. Excitement, perhaps, flickering across his features. My stomach twisted with a sickening sense of dread. I knew that look, that furtive glance over his shoulder as he murmured into the phone. It was the same look he'd had the day I discovered his email from Helen, his ex-flame. As if in a trance, I found myself drifting closer, close enough to catch snippets of his hushed conversation. Can't wait to see you, babe. Margaret's been a nightmare. Soon as I can get away from this mess. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. All this time, as I'd fought tooth and nail to preserve our family, to protect Rachel from Margaret's venom, Thomas had been plotting his escape. With another woman, no less. White-hot rage coursed through my veins, burning away the last shreds of doubt or hesitation that had lingered. This man, this so-called partner and father figure, had betrayed us in the worst possible way. As Thomas ended the call and turned back to face us, I met his gaze with a look of pure, unbridled fury. You spineless, faithless coward, I spat, the words dripping with venom. How dare you stand there and let your mother tear us apart, all while carrying on an affair behind our backs? Thomas's eyes widened, his face paling as he realized I'd overheard his conversation. Evelyn, Save it, I snarled, cutting him off with a sharp gesture. I'm done with your lies and excuses. We're leaving, and you can stay here and wallow in your pathetic existence with your precious mother. Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the room, Rachel hot on my heels. As we packed our belongings in tense silence, I could hear Thomas and Margaret's raised voices echoing from the kitchen. But I tuned them out. They were no longer my concern. From this moment on, my focus would be on building a life for Rachel and myself. A life free from the toxicity and manipulation that had plagued us for far too long. As we loaded our bags into the car and pulled away from that wretched house, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear. We were finally free. The drive to Lillian's house was a blur, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins as I clutched the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Rachel sat beside me in silence, her gaze fixed out the window, but I could see the occasional tremor in her hands, a testament to the emotional turmoil we'd just endured. As we pulled into Lillian's driveway, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was our sanctuary, our safe haven from the toxicity that had threatened to consume us back at Margaret's house. Lillian must have heard us arrive, for she flung open the front door before we'd even gathered our bags from the car. Her eyes widened as she took in our haggard appearances, and she ushered us inside without a word. It wasn't until we were settled in her cozy living room, mugs of steaming tea in hand, that she finally spoke. All right, you two, she said, her no-nonsense tone softened by a hint of concern. What in the world happened? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat, a lump of emotion rendering me momentarily speechless. Rachel, bless her resilient spirit, took up the mantle. Grandma finally stood up to Grandpa and Great-Grandma, she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. We couldn't take their manipulation and belittling anymore, so we left. Lillian's gaze shifted to me, her eyes narrowing as she studied my face. I take it there's more to the story than that. I nodded, taking a steadying breath before launching into the sordid tale. Thomas's emotional distance, his dismissive attitude toward Rachel's dreams, and finally, the ultimate betrayal. His clandestine affair with his ex-flame. As the words tumbled out, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders, the burden of carrying this secret slowly dissipating. Lillian listened in stoic silence, her expression unreadable, until finally I fell silent, drained from the emotional purge. That sorry son of a bitch, she muttered, shaking her head in disgust. And to think, I always thought he was a decent man. A humorless chuckle escaped my lips. We were all fooled, Lillian, by him and his wretched mother. Lillian's gaze softened as she reached across the coffee table to grasp my hand. You did the right thing, getting yourself and Rachel out of that toxic environment. No one deserves to be treated that way, least of all by their own family. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. I just don't know what comes next, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. After all these years, I've grown so accustomed to having Thomas in my life, for better or worse. The thought of starting over, of building a new life without him. I trailed off, the weight of the uncertainty pressing down on me. Nonsense, Lillian scoffed, her tone leaving no room for argument. You're not starting over, Evelyn. You're starting anew, free from the shackles of that toxic relationship, and you've got me and Rachel by your side every step of the way. I glanced over at my granddaughter, who offered me a watery smile and a resolute nod. In that moment, I felt a surge of determination, a renewed sense of purpose. Lillian was right. This wasn't the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where Rachel and I would forge our own path, unburdened by the weight of Margaret's manipulation and Thomas's betrayal. As if sensing my newfound resolve, Lillian gave my hand one final squeeze before rising to her feet. Right then, she declared, her eyes sparkling with a familiar mischievous glint. First order of business, we're going to need a game plan for getting you two back on your feet. Starting with finding you a place of your own, somewhere you can breathe and heal without any lingering toxicity. A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I nodded in agreement. This was the Lillian I knew and loved. Practical, no nonsense, and fiercely protective of those she cared about. As she bustled off to gather her laptop and begin the apartment search, I turned to Rachel, reaching out to grasp her hand. Are you ready for this, sweetheart? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Ready to start building our new life on our own terms? Rachel's answering smile was radiant, a beacon of hope and resilience that chased away the lingering shadows of doubt and fear. More than ready, Grandma, she replied, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. Let's do this. And in that moment, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that we would be all right. Because together, we were unstoppable. It had been a blissful few weeks of peace and tranquility at Lillian's house, a much-needed respite from the toxicity we'd endured at Margaret's. Rachel and I had settled into a comfortable routine, focusing our energy on mapping out her college plans and reveling in our newfound freedom. But of course, the calm couldn't last forever. It was a crisp autumn evening when the doorbell rang, shattering the cozy silence. Lillian, ever the pragmatist, shot me a knowing look before rising to answer the door. Well, if it isn't the prodigal son himself, she drawled, her voice carrying into the living room where Rachel and I sat. To what do we owe the pleasure? My heart sank as Thomas's familiar footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by his pleading voice. Evelyn, please, we need to talk. I steeled myself, squaring my shoulders as he entered the room. His eyes were rimmed with dark circles, his hair disheveled, clear signs of the turmoil he'd been enduring since our departure. There's nothing to discuss, Thomas, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We've made our decision, and we're not going back. His gaze flickered to Rachel, who met his stare with a defiant tilt of her chin. Don't look at me, she said coolly. I'm with Grandma on this one. Thomas's shoulders slumped, and for a moment I almost felt a pang of pity for him. Almost. Evelyn, please, he implored, turning his attention back to me. I know I've made mistakes, but we're family. We're supposed to work through these things together. I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. Work through things? Like you worked through your affair with Helen? Or like you worked through your mother's constant belittling and manipulation? His face paled, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. Good. That's not fair, he protested weakly. You know how my mother can be. I was just trying to keep the peace. At the expense of our dignity and self-worth? I countered, my voice rising with each word. You stood by and let her tear us down time and time again. You chose her twisted ideals over your own wife and granddaughter. Rachel nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with a mixture of hurt and defiance. We deserve better than that, Grandpa. Better than being treated like a burden, like our dreams and ambitions didn't matter. Thomas opened his mouth, no doubt to offer another feeble excuse, but Lillian cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. Save your breath, Thomas, she said, her tone brooking no argument. These two remarkable women have had enough of your empty promises and half-hearted apologies. They've made their choice, and it's time you respected that. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room, thick and suffocating. Thomas's gaze flickered between the three of us, a desperate plea etched into his features. But before he could utter another word, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. A glance at the screen revealed Margaret's name, and a sickening sense of dread washed over me. "It's your mother," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. Thomas's eyes widened, and he reached for the phone, but I snatched it away, answering the call with a terse, "Hello?" Margaret's reedy voice crackled through the speaker, laced with a hint of panic. "Evelyn, thank goodness, it's your mother-in-law. I've had a bit of an incident. I need you to come back home right away." I felt Rachel tense beside me, her hand finding mine and giving it a reassuring squeeze. In that moment, I knew. This was just another ploy, another manipulation tactic, designed to lure us back into Margaret's web of toxicity. Squaring my jaw, I tightened my grip on Rachel's hand and met Thomas's pleading gaze with a steely one of my own. "I'm sorry, Margaret," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "But we're not coming back. Not now, not ever. It's time you and Thomas accepted that." The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line was all the response I needed. Without another word, I ended the call and tossed the phone aside, a weight lifting from my shoulders. This was it, the point of no return. And as I looked around at the faces of my chosen family, my heart swelled with a sense of pride and determination. We had broken free from Margaret's toxic grasp, and nothing, not her manipulations, not Thomas's desperate pleas, would ever drag us back into that abyss again. Our future was our own to shape, built on a foundation of mutual respect, love, and unwavering resilience, and I couldn't wait to see where this new path would lead us. The weeks following our confrontation with Thomas and Margaret were a whirlwind of activity. With Lillian's unwavering support, Rachel and I scoured listings for affordable apartments, determined to find a place we could call our own, a sanctuary free from the toxicity that had plagued our lives for far too long. It wasn't an easy process, juggling apartment viewings with Rachel's college applications and my own job search. But we tackled each challenge with a renewed sense of determination, bolstered by the knowledge that we were charting our own course, beholden to no one but ourselves. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of searching, we found it, a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, just a stone's throw from the local university. It was modest, to be sure, but the moment we stepped through the door, a sense of peace washed over me. This was our fresh start, our chance to build a life on our own terms. The day we moved in was a flurry of activity, with Lillian and her ever-present practicality keeping us organized and focused. As we unpacked box after box, arranging our belongings in this new space, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. Just a few short months ago, I had been trapped in a cycle of emotional abuse and manipulation, my sense of self-worth slowly chipped away by Margaret's relentless belittling. But now, surrounded by the warmth and love of my chosen family, I felt a newfound strength coursing through my veins. We had broken free, and nothing, not Thomas's feeble attempts at reconciliation, not Margaret's manipulative ploys, could ever drag us back into that abyss again. As the weeks turned into months, Rachel and I settled into our new routine, reveling in the simple joys of our hard-won independence. We spent evenings poring over her college applications, meticulously crafting essays, and fine-tuning her personal statements. And when the acceptance letters began to trickle in, each one felt like a victory, a tangible reminder that our sacrifices and struggles had been worth it. The day Rachel received her letter from her dream school, a prestigious university just a few hours away, was one I'll never forget. She burst through the front door, eyes shining with tears of joy, clutching the envelope to her chest. "I got in, Grandma," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. "They accepted me." In that moment, all the pain and heartache we'd endured seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of pride and accomplishment. I gathered her into my arms, holding her close as we both let the tears of relief and happiness flow freely. This was what it was all about, ensuring that Rachel had every opportunity to chase her dreams, to forge her own path without the weight of someone else's toxic influence holding her back. As we celebrated that night, Lillian raised her glass in a toast, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of pride and mischief. "To Rachel," she proclaimed, "for having the courage to stand up for herself and her ambitions. And to Evelyn, for being the fierce, unwavering force that helped make this all possible." I felt a flush of warmth spread through me at her words, a reminder of the incredible journey we'd undertaken to reach this point. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I doubted my own strength and resolve. But in the end, it had all been worth it. To see Rachel's radiant smile, to bask in the glow of her hard-earned success. As I looked around at the faces of my chosen family, my heart swelled with a sense of gratitude and contentment. We had broken free from the shackles of Margaret's toxicity, forging our own path, built on a foundation of mutual respect, love, and unwavering resilience. And in that moment, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was what true family looked like. Not bound by blood or obligation, but by the unbreakable bonds of support, empowerment, and unconditional acceptance. This was our legacy, our gift to the generations that would follow. The knowledge that they, too, could break free from the chains of emotional abuse and manipulation and carve out a life grounded in dignity and self-worth. As Rachel embarked on this new chapter, ready to spread her wings and soar, I knew that she would carry that lesson with her always, a beacon of hope and resilience, to guide her through whatever challenges life might throw her way. And for me, that was the greatest victory of all.